G'day everyone, welcome back to Rule of Reason. And my guest today is Graeme Irwin. He was the principal at the school that I went to, and he is also my uncle. And I'm very excited to share his story with you today. So let's get straight into it. Graeme, thank you for agreeing to talk to me today.
Fantastic. It's great. I'm really going to enjoy this.
So I think it might be prudent for those who may not know you, just to give a little bit of a background to who you are, and that might shape maybe why your life has led the path that it has. Would you mind just starting and talking briefly about where you grew up, life on a farm, and how that, I guess, let's start with that. Let's start with farm life, and then we'll talk about professional life.
Fine. I grew up on a farm in the New England area, a little place called Warialda, one of those little towns that if you drive through and you blink, you miss it. 1,400 people on a good day, many more dogs, many more horses, lots more animals in the town than there were people, I think. So I grew up there in an idyllic little farm, 4,000 acres, so it wasn't that little really, in the slopes and plains just there north of Warialda. Just a beautiful, idyllic place. There were creeks, there were mountains. There was actually an extinct volcano on our property, and we could find volcanic bubbles and volcanic ash and all sorts of other rocks that were fascinating. So I grew up in this wonderful environment and was able to ride horses, was able to do all the things you do on a property, and had lots of adventures. It's wonderful.
It's very easy looking back to remember the really good parts and maybe forget the hard parts. While it was idyllic, as you said, was it also tough? You know, growing up on a farm, it's a very physical labour. Your dad obviously was a hardworking man, and your mum ran the household. Would you say that your upbringing was a fairly strict upbringing where everyone had to sort of play their part because the family had to make it all happen?
There was no question about that. Everyone had to get involved. There was, say, shearing going on. We had sheep, thousands of sheep on the property, and so shearing time every September school holidays, we would be involved in the shearing. So we would be mustering sheep on horseback. We'd be corralling the sheep and getting the sheep into the shearing shed. Then we'd be picking up the wool and baling the wool. It just went on and on. And then, of course, that was one season. And then the other season was harvest. So when the wheat was harvested, we were involved in the preparation of that, ploughing the fields, sowing the wheat, and then harvesting was a very big deal. And everything depended on those two things, the shearing and the money that came from that, and the harvesting and the money that came from that. So it was a time when I learnt how to work hard.
Yeah, well, that sort of leads me to my next question. What responsibilities do you think life growing up on a farm in a family business, more or less, taught you that perhaps life in school can't teach you or maybe doesn't prepare you for?
Well, the country is unforgiving, so you can, if you're not smart and wise in how you negotiate the country, there are lots of things that would want to bite you and kill you. I remember walking over lots of snakes and being in the vicinity of snakes, having to defend myself at times. So there were things like that. And then animals, animals, if they're cornered, usually animals are fairly placid, like sheep and cattle. But if they're cornered, then they can be quite dangerous. So horses. So I rode horses quite a bit, and horses are beautiful creatures. But they can get spooked by different things in the grass and so on, and suddenly you can find yourself toppling over the head of the horse and onto the ground. And so that happened many times. And then, of course, when we got a little bit more sophisticated and we had motorbikes, then, of course, there were then the inevitable motorbike accidents as well, because the terrain often changed because of flooding, or whatever, and things were quite interesting in the country. So had many adventures, I have to say.
Was there was there ever a time where you looked at what your dad did and you thought, I want to take over the family farm and be the one who runs it, or it was pretty obvious to you that you had a different path for you?
You love the land when you're raised on the land. You love it, and you can see that your life could be there. And I grew up thinking, yes, I'll probably be involved on the land somehow. Although I remember thinking this, there must be an easier way to make a living because it's very, very difficult work. So the thing that changed everything for us was that when I was 19, my father lost the property completely. So there were, at that time, and there still now, you hear about farms being lost because the bank forecloses or there's just not the income to run farms. It's really quite difficult. So this happened when I was 19. So I was in just finishing the HSC. My grandfather, who was 87, had just passed away. And I was looking at, what do I do next? And of course, the option of farming was taken right out of the equation because it was not there. And then basically we had to go and find our own way of life out in the big world.
So it was thrust upon you. Before we move away from the farming lifestyle, I just wonder, because you've now got an entire lifetime in education, do you think there are skills that you learnt or strengths, characteristics that you learnt from a life growing up on the farm, on the country, which, as we've sort of addressed, is challenging? It's wonderful, but challenging. Are there things that you think the average kid today, who you say might come through St. Philip's or through schooling in general in the Western world, could really benefit from, that they're missing out on, that sort of upbringing, as it becomes rarer and rarer, is no longer available?
Yeah, growing up in the country, you're very close to nature, and so you see all the different changes very vividly, and that builds a respect for nature, respect for the land, that we are here to care for the land and not to degrade the land, but we're here to care for animals. So it gave me a great respect for animals and a love for animals. I loved horses, so I think that's something that builds a strength that you can't get anywhere else. And then when things are asked of you, because culling, was part of being a farmer. So things would be asked of you, such as at a young age, there are too many cats being born, too many kittens. It's your job to dispose of them. That's really hard as a little kid, but it was just understood that you do that. You get a bag, and you put the kittens in the bag, and you put the bag in a bucket of water. That was what we had to do. We had to cull rabbits because there were too many rabbits, and so I knew how to trap rabbits. I knew how to shoot rabbits, and the same with beautiful kangaroos, because they would destroy the farm's livelihood. So there were lessons that you just had to learn that were hard life lessons that I learned in that environment.
Yeah, would it be fair to say this is something that I have tried to get across to people, that you can have two things be true simultaneously? It seems now more than I remember when I was younger that people take a very black and white view of things, no matter how complicated they are, and just go, well, it's either this or it's this. But as you've just said, well, I loved animals, but I also knew my responsibility was to, so you had both things being true at the one time, because presumably if they destroy the livelihood of the farm, the family doesn't make money, and as you now know, the farm was taken from the family, but that could have happened earlier if you hadn't got on top of these pestilence, I suppose. But it doesn't make it any easier. And that, I guess, forces you to grow up when you presented these, what we guess now would call more adult themes that kids are sort of protected from, death and suffering and hardship. We seem to protect kids from that, and they don't really discover it until they leave school and become adults. But it sounds like it helped build a lot of resilience in you, and a good work ethic, I guess.
Oh, definitely a good work ethic. Yes, that things can't wait. Things don't wait. Maybe in the city things can wait, but on a farm things can't wait because animals depend on you, and so and crops come along at the right time. Shearing comes along at the time that it does, and things have to be done. So you have to give up other things for the sake of the farm. So you have to really sort out your priorities as a farm person. I think in terms of animals, I think the experience that I remember, excuse me, is the beautiful horse we had that I grew up with, and she started to get old. It was a horse that we called her piebald because she was a piebald coloured horse, and black and brown and white spots all over her. And she was a beautiful creature, and she loved children, and children could climb all over her. And so from a young age, we rode piebald. And then she got older, and she passed away. And I remember that as being such an emotional time, Our piebald has passed away, and you can say, well, it's only an animal, but that creature was our friend, and at times had saved us, in different situations, and we just adored that horse. So my brothers and I, animals became pretty special, and you got to value those creatures as being God's creation, being very special.
Yeah, and in those formidable years, I think it really did shape you, and I think it was the case of a lot of people in your generation, because times even in the city weren't necessarily easy either. So something that we don't necessarily see in younger people, and you can talk to this in a minute, because they haven't had to deal with such hard times. They're growing up with different skills and different strengths. So the farm chapter of your life ends at 19. Presumably, because you're finishing year 12, university becomes your next step. Was that? I guess what I want to know is you're a teacher now. Was that your first thought? Was I'd be really great at being a teacher, or did you sort of stumble across it, or perhaps did someone see something in you and say, "Hey, Graeme, you'd make a really great teacher"? Like, how did that all come about?
Well, at that time, things might be different in the country now, but at that time, basically, you did your high school certificate, and then you found work somewhere. So for me, the option of going to university wasn't there at that point in time. So and I needed to make an income. I needed to look after myself. So my parents sent me off to Sydney. I went down to Sydney and applied for a whole lot of jobs in Sydney. And they were saying to me, their advice, that we've lost the farm, go and find a big, secure company with lots of money and get a job with them. So I ended up getting a job with a bank, not the bank that foreclosed on my father's property, but another bank. And I started working for this bank. So I worked for that bank for about 4 years. And because I had a HSC, and not everyone did at that time, I was put on relief staff. And I went to 52 different branches around New South Wales in the space of about 2 years. So out in New South Wales country and in the metropolitan areas. So I got to know the state pretty well, 52 different places. And often I'd be there for a week or 2 weeks, maximum of a month in little places like Tumut or out west at Forbes or Parkes or Dubbo or somewhere like that. And I got to know New South Wales very, very well.
And so many parts of regional New South Wales are beautiful. You know, Parkes, Forbes, Orange, Tumut, like they're all, and from north to south, because you were north of Tamworth in Warialda. That's a beautiful part of the world, as you said. But even heading down to the plains out southwest New South Wales, you know, it's completely different again. So that would have been really great. And there's some really rich history there too. Yeah, so you've travelled around, and I guess now you're thinking, okay, well, my life is in the bank. How did teaching come about? Because that seems like a big sort of left-hand turn.
Look, I don't want to disparage people working in finance, but I was bored stiff, and it wasn't for me. So the thing that kept me going was that I could be paid my salary, and because I was on relief staff, then all my expenses were paid. So I could actually save my whole salary. So that was really good. And coming from, you know, a situation where my parents had lost everything, that was something that I valued. So I stuck with it. But then I got to a point where I just couldn't go any further. It was, I was bored and I was lonely because I was traveling around all the place. Different places, and I got to a point where I was in Barrel Hotel. I was working there in the bank, and I went to Barrel Hotel and stayed there the 2 weeks I think I was in Barrel. And one night I came home into my room, and I knelt on the side of my bed and I said, God, I do not want to do this anymore. I want to know what I'm supposed to be doing with my life, because this doesn't seem like it's a lifetime career. Now, I can't remember whether it happened straight away or it happened in the weeks following, but there was a sense that came over me that I knew I had to be a teacher. So I went and talked to family members and friends, and they confirmed, yeah, you would make a good teacher because you've done X, Y, and Z, and you would love that profession. So I applied to universities, and I wanted to go to, Sydney. Desperately wanted to go to Sydney. That was the place to go. But I applied for Newcastle as well. And there's another story in regard to that.
Well, feel free. You can continue with the story, because I guess the arc of the story I'm trying to head to is the creation of St. Philip's Christian College. But I think it's important to lay the groundwork of how you became a teacher, because it's not obvious from your upbringing that that's where you would end up. You and I both know, based on our faith, that God had a calling on your life to do this, but you don't know that when you're paving the way in life. You're just opening the very next door that comes to you, not knowing what's behind it. So presumably you get into Newcastle University.
Yeah, just before that, back when I was 19, and we'd lost the farm, and I was driving around Newcastle. Around, you better cut that bit out because it wasn't Newcastle. I was driving around New South Wales, and I went to meet my brother in Ballina, and so I was driving across the Great Divide from Tenterfield across, and I had this car accident. So I wasn't a Christian at that point. I'd grown up in a religious family, but I wasn't a Christian. I hadn't given my life to God, because what I had thought at that time was, I will do that later, because I went to a little Presbyterian church as a child, and it was pretty boring. So I thought Christianity's boring. So, but it seems right, and I should commit myself to it, but I'm going to leave that decision until later on. And so I'm driving across the Great Divide from Tenterfield across to the coast, and it's raining and it's late at night, and the car aquaplanes on the water, and it goes over a cliff. And I have that vision that people seem to do, at least the movies tell you, where all their whole life goes in front of them. And I was only 19, so it wasn't a lot. It wasn't a long reel. And the car went over the cliff, and then it went down the cliff, and then suddenly came to a stop. And I was just there precariously, but I was able to get out. So it wasn't it was a deep ravine there, but the slope I was on wasn't dead straight down. It was so I was able to get out of the car and crawl back up onto the road. And as I did that, I kicked the back tyre because I was really annoyed with myself. And then I sat on the side of the road and realised that what I'd been thinking, I will give myself to God when I'm older, and that I'll do that later. And then I realised there might not be a later. You know, my life could end at 19. And so I need to do it now. So that led me on a path to find out what Christianity really meant and what I should do to commit myself to God. So that changed my whole trajectory. Then I went into the bank and was working in the bank. Then I got to Barrel, and I think there was something developing in me that I wanted to be useful to God. I wanted to do something of significance, something with purpose. And so in the Barrel pub room, I was just searching God out, asking, what is it that you want me to do? And then teaching came. So as I said, I got other people to confirm that was a good idea. I enrolled in different universities, really wanted to go to Sydney. But then Newcastle University came up first. And I thought, well, I might miss out. So, you know, I'm a mature age student at this point, might miss out. So maybe I'll just take Newcastle's offer. And so I came to Newcastle. Most people from the country at that time didn't like Newcastle because it was smoggy and dirty, and who would want to go there after living in the pristine, beautiful country? So I went to Newcastle and got involved in the university, and that's where I met my wife, Sue. And we fell in love, and I decided to move to her church. And her church was St. Philip's Anglican Church. And so that's how I got involved in St. Philip's Anglican Church. And then the vision of the school came up within that community. And it was a time where different schools were being developed around the country, different Christian schools. And the idea, the vision came, and I got involved. I was teaching in a Christian school at that point, and I got involved. And then I was asked, would I want to lead this? Now, when most people were asked, they probably stood back, but I stood forward because I felt that this was my life's calling. This was something I really wanted to do. I mean, there were no students. There were no facilities, there was no money, so start a school. And so that was the job I was given, find all of those things.
Just for timeline, so this is 1984? 82. Okay. And so the very first day of St. Philip's Christian College, where was that? How many students did you have?
So the 4th of February, 1982, and we had, over the year, we had an average of 25 students. On the first day, we had 18, and I think on the last day, we had 28. So people will say 25 because that's an average, or thereabouts. And they were age range from kindergarten all the way through to year 7. Strange mix, but that's what we did to start the school. We had 2 teachers. I taught from year 3 upwards, and another teacher, Michael Dunn, taught up to 2nd class. And so they were composite classes. And that's how we started. And we started in an old church hall and renovated, and had wonderful people who just came in voluntarily and did all the work. The blackboards were painted on the wall. There weren't proper blackboards at that time. So we did with very little. What we had was a vision, and a vision of Christian education.
And was the vision one because you felt that there was currently a gap in education, in Christian education? As in, obviously there was education around Australia, but specifically Christian education, did you feel that maybe specifically for Newcastle, it was something that was missing?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. So Christian education is about putting God back in education. Originally, education was all about that. Education started in monasteries and places like that, where it was God was central. But the education systems had taken, and the universities had really taken God out of the equation at all, to completely. So what we wanted to do was bring God back into that equation, and respect the Creator of the universe, and teach children the truth.
Now, because of our faith, you and I know that if you're doing what you believe is your calling and God's work, you come up against spiritual opposition. Did you find, especially in the early years, that there were times that you thought it was all going to fail, or things were happening that you couldn't explain that were unfair, and you just thought, this shouldn't be this hard? Did that happen at all?
Sure. Yeah. Look, sometimes from within and sometimes from without. So from within, I had a board member who would say to me, Graeme, you're only young, and as the school develops and matures a little bit, we're going to get a proper principal, because, you're young and you're not a proper principal. And so they were in the days when I grew a moustache because I wanted to look older. I was only 29 and I needed to look older for the sake of parents, so I grew a moustache. So I
never knew that about you.
Okay.
I knew about the moustache.
Yeah.
That's why you grew the moustache.
So that's why I did it. And he changed his mind after some years. But and he was good. He was great help to our school. But he was very straight. He said, "No, you're only young, and when the school matures, we're going to get a proper principal." But I was zealous. I knew that I was supposed to be there, and I knew that this is what I was supposed to be doing with my life. So it didn't really worry me. I pushed ahead and looked at what we could do to make this the very, very best school that children could possibly go to. So yes, passion for the purpose was something that I really had at that time, and wanted to push into that. There are other people who from outside who would say things to me like, "Why do you want to start another school?" Because there are perfectly good schools down the road. There is a state school down the road. There's a Catholic school up the road. Why on earth do you want to start a new school? So that was, 40 years ago or more. And now I can say that the number of students we have in St. Philip's with the dynamic learning and the young parents program and our early learning centres is significantly more. It's way over 1,500 students, and more than all the other schools in the Waratah area.
Did you have a vision when you started, or at some point in the early years as it started to build momentum, of where you hoped it might go?
Well, the vision came to me progressively. So when I first started this school, I wanted 500. And then 750. And then 900, and this is over years, and then 1,200. And, of course, the vision now is 1,500 plus.
And that we're speaking specifically at Waratah, or is this across? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but St Philip's has 6 campuses now between Port Stephens, Cessnock, Central Coast, Waratah.
Yes. Yes, there's young parents at Wyong, and we have 7 registered schools, but we also have a number of campuses for our special schools. So we have about 5,500 students now altogether. So yes, so that vision of expanding came in the 90s, about the mid-90s. And the first school was a school at Port Stephens. That school now has over 800, perhaps close to 900 with all the other aspects of it. So there's a bilingual Aboriginal school, a Worimi school, where we teach the Worimi language. That's a small school. There's about 50 students there. Then there's a dynamic learning school for students with autism, and that's there as well. So there's lots of things happening in that campus, like all our campuses. We now have a school at Cessnock, and it's quite a big school. There's 1,200, 1,300 students being served there, and a school at Gosford with about 800 there. And then we have the young parents' schools. There's 2 of those, one at Waratah and one at Wyong, and they're a completely different story that I could tell you about separately. And then there are 4 dynamic learning schools. Those schools are for students with autism and school refusal and emotional issues. And they're beautiful schools. And the staff there love the students and help them through very difficult situations.
It's amazing for me to see the growth of the school. I joined kindergarten in 1994 at St Philip's at Waratah, and it really, I was 5, but it did feel as if the school was growing. The secondary building was new, had recently opened in that sort of time frame. But when I was there, the military barracks was still operating. So, you could peek through the fence and see the trucks driving around. And now that's the Performing Arts Theatre. It's the gymnasium. It's like, you fast forward all of these years, and it's 30 years, 20 years since I was 20 years since I finished, so it's 30 years since I started. Yeah, I know. It's making me feel old. But to see how great the school is going, even to talk to your farming upbringing, because if I remember correctly, Cessnock has a lot of open area. Does it have horses and animals, or no?
It concentrates on agriculture for students. So there's a lot of students taking agriculture. So we have cattle, we have sheep. We have crops that are grown there. So there's all sorts of things happening in that space, chickens and so forth.
Definitely not an expert in education, but I can't imagine there's many schools in the country offering that.
Yeah, well, there are a number, but I think it's appropriate for that area, and the students love it. There's been some great results coming out of students who have taken that on, and we'd love to even expand further. We're in the vineyard area, and we'd love to expand further by securing our own property, farm, back to my farming days. So we're looking at that. By the way, I didn't tell you about one other school that we're just acquiring. And this school is in the little country town of Cooma in the Snowy Mountains. And we have a school down there, only 50 students, but we're starting off this year as our very first year. And those staff members are going to be with us shortly for our conference that we have at the beginning of the year for staff. So I'm looking forward to that very much next Wednesday.
Yeah. Well, Cooma is a beautiful part of the world.
It's gorgeous.
So lovely. I get the sense that you're quite passionate about the young parents' schools.
Yes.
Would you like to explain a little bit about what they are and the significance of them?
So we started one school in 2000 and the other in 2012. So the one at Wyong was 2012. So the first young parents was about recognizing that in our society there are some young people, young women who are having babies as teenagers, as young as 14. And because of that, then their ability to access education is restricted. And then coming along to school with a baby is not the normal thing. And even though, our society would understand, there's quite a bit of bullying that goes on in regard to these young people. You would think our society would understand, but I don't think it does. So we set up these schools that enable them to have expert advice, that they have an early learning centre where they can send their children to, and that early learning centre is trauma-informed. And so the staff there know how to deal with the parents who may be going through all sorts of issues. So the young mothers might be going through homelessness, poverty, domestic violence, all sorts of things that they're suffering, and they're trying to raise a child or children and get an education. It's a big deal. Many of them, their families have been caught in the welfare cycle and not able to progress, and some of them have been the very first in their families to actually get through high school and then go on to tertiary education. So it's about helping two generations. It's about helping the parent, the young parent, but also the child. And we have had a lot of success with, they're at small numbers, but a wonderful program, beautiful program.
There are so many wonderful things that St. Philip's does, and I don't think it is... I'm not presuming too much to say that the love and the compassion showed through the school for everyone is Christ-centered. And the school is Christ-centered, and they're not ashamed of that. Education changes over the years as society changes. And the way that education is done now versus, say, when I went to school in the 90s or when you started the school in the 80s. And because you've been there for the full 44 years now, coming up on 45 years, what do you see... I guess it's a two-pronged question. What do you see as the biggest challenge for educators with the kids coming through now? But then also, what challenges do kids have coming into school? I mean, I suspect that technology and AI is a big challenge on both sides. How is the school, or how is education, broadly speaking, tackling education now as it changes? It seems to be changing so rapidly.
Yes, it is. But there's one thing that never changes, and that's the thing. If you concentrate on that thing, then you're going to have success as an educator. So you need a curriculum. You need to be able to deliver that curriculum well and in an engaging way. You certainly need those elements. You might need technology. You need good texts. You need you need to prepare yourself well for delivering education to students. So you need to give them a good product. But the thing that never changes is relationship. So the relationship between the student and the teacher. And if that doesn't work, then students will not learn. They'll reject what the teacher's saying, basically, or take it lightly. So the thing that we can do in Christian schools is you can do it in any school, but there's a motivation for us to do it because of our faith, that it's a relational faith. We serve a relational God. He loved us first, and he invites us into relationship, and he asks us to love others. And part of our love for our students is to really love them in such a way that they can maximize their educational benefit and learn and grow in wisdom and understanding as a person and do life well. So that relationship element really never changes. I mean, if we eventually have AI teachers, then of course that will be degraded even further. And how do we form relationship? So the thing that we've discovered as well, and this goes not just to children and students, but it's also for adults. So the teaching profession has been in crisis, and teacher training has been criticised heavily. And we started an apprenticeship model of teacher training where we bring our trainee teachers into the school setting and we link them with a senior teacher who becomes their mentor, not just for a practicum, but for the whole year and sometimes several years. So that relationship building for skilling up and helping the next generation of teachers is now part of St. Philip's. And we've perfected this model. We call it the third space. And you know, the common name, of course, is for the programs is a teaching school. And now we have helped people all over the country start these apprenticeship-style teaching schools. So they still, the trainee students still get a degree through a tertiary institute, but they're in the schools learning from real teachers rather than in a sterile university, I have to say.
Which I think it's a great idea. I guess it works in two ways. You've got the young, enthusiastic teacher fresh out of university who really wants to do a great job. But not everyone necessarily has... not everyone's born with the relational skills to walk in front of 30 students and who are all different and go, I can engage every single one of you day one. So to bridge that gap with a teacher who's been doing it for 10, 20, 30 years and go, look, this is what I've seen in my time here. And it also then allows them to impart their wisdom, which I'm starting to understand more and more as people get older. It becomes less about what they can achieve for themselves and more about how they can impart all their years of learning into someone else so it doesn't seem wasted. I had that conversation with my dad last night, and he was saying as he passed 60, he really felt deeply that his priorities shifted to I need to be able to help the next generation. I've paved the way. Not to say that he's stopping going forward. You still progress, but you want someone to come along with you now on the journey as your apprentice to go, look, watch me, learn from me, so that when my time is done, you can just pick up and keep going. That's right. As opposed to making every new person have to start from scratch every time. And I think that's the way that humans were designed.
Definitely.
To do it. So it's so great that St. Philip's has jumped on that and that you're putting it out to other schools to help other people as well. Because as you said, teaching really seems to be, it's heavily scrutinized teaching. Yes. There seems, at least observing from me outside of education, there seems to be a decline in uptake of teaching as a degree, which only makes it harder for schools then to employ staff if there's a reduced number of staff. And yeah, it's great to see St. Philip's is doing what they can in that space to go, well, look, things are getting hard, but we're not giving up. We're going to make it as good as possible.
So this model attracts young people. You know, if they're in our context as a Christian school, if they have a calling on their life for teaching, and you know that they're really passionate about teaching, but they also love Jesus. They want to see people know Jesus and develop their own relationship with Jesus, then those two things, we accept them into our teaching school and train them up. So we have these young people around the schools for 4 years before they're actually totally on their own in the classroom. So there's a lot of preparation time and learning from others and there's so much you can learn from textbooks and from lectures. You've got to practice it. Teaching is a practice, and you've got to work out how you actually engage with the children, how you engage with different kinds of children and different situations, and learn to love them and respect them. And it's the way to do it. Watching an experienced teacher teach children how to learn to read, there's no better way to learn the trade than watching an experienced teacher do that.
Have you found that having the two teachers in the classroom, do the children respond differently knowing that there's a teacher under instruction, or they don't really care? And I guess the answer to this would be more obvious. Are you finding that the quality of the teacher at the end of the 2 years, 4 years, that you're then getting at the end of the training is significantly higher because of the instruction they've had over those years?
Significantly, yes. They come out after 4 years equal to, say, a third-year out teacher rather than a first-year out teacher. So they're well on the way to being a very, very good teacher.
Yeah, that's great. Well, what we might pivot to, I guess, is you've now got a lot of experience under your belt, fast-forwarding to today.
Sure.
And that has also brought a level of a reputation within the industry that has allowed you to speak in Canberra at a governmental level. Order of Australia medal recipient, is that correct?
That's true.
Which is a wonderful honour to be bestowed, and very deserving, I must say. How have you found that avenue, that stage of your life now as a senior member in education, being able to speak into the government? Because presumably that in 1982, you never thought this is where this is going. Has it been a really great experience being able to do that?
Yes, I'm not doing that as much these days. That was a time when I was involved as chair of AACS, the Australian Association of Christian Schools. So we had a lot of opportunity at that time to visit schools all around Australia and talk to politicians and so on about the Christian school movement in this country. So that was more that time. And I'm really concentrating on St. Philip's now and seeing it grow and develop and acquire other schools. So we're in the process of doing that. We believe that the next phase of Christian education will involve multi-school organisations, as it will with state schools and Catholic schools. There's got to be a change with education, and the big departments, the big dioceses, are quite cumbersome, and the approach now is to really look at smaller multi-school organisations where expertise can be shared around, and where the leaders of those multi-school organisations are much closer to the ground and much closer to the people actually doing the work. And then the sharing from different school to school can make the education system better. Now, the Grattan Institute put out a report on this, saying that this was something that Australia had not tried, yet we at St. Philip's have been doing it for years. And now other state and Catholic systems are looking at this whole idea of just reducing their size so that they can meet the needs on the ground and be more effective and efficient. Now, independent schools, and particularly Christian schools, are then looking the other way. They've been basically one-off schools, and now they're looking to join a multi-school group so that they have that support.
So the definition, I guess, of a multi-school group is not, say, St. Philip's, where it has a number of campuses, but St. Philip's joining with other established schools to work together. Is that the idea?
That's right. Yes.
So it would be, hypothetically, you would collaborate with Newcastle Grammar School, which is another big school here in Newcastle, and you would work together to optimise curriculum holistically. Is that the idea?
Yes. So there are different associations. Say in the Hunter Valley, there's the Hunter Region Independent Schools, and Newcastle Grammar's on that, and St Philip's Schools are on that. So there's that form of collaboration. But when we talk about a multi-school organisation, that basically means that there's they're all owned by the one organisation, and so so a school group like St Philip's would be wanting like-minded schools. So a grammar school is a different kind of school to a Christian school. So we wouldn't necessarily be looking to have grammar schools join us. They might want to if they wanted to be more Christian, but and we'd be open to that. But we're really looking for like-minded schools to join us, and I think that's where the greater benefit will be for those schools.
Okay, well, I've taken up almost an hour of your time. So what I like to do to finish every episode is my goal with this podcast is to share meaning, wisdom, and hope based on everything we've talked about. So your life up until this point, your experience in education, and so everything that you know now, what is it that makes you hopeful for the future, both in general but also in education?
Oh, people. Children are beautiful, and they have so much potential. Young people are incredibly intelligent, and they have so much potential. And teachers are magnificent human beings, and they have incredible influence over teachers. So working with those people is something that I have enjoyed immensely. Very different from working with animals on the farm. So people are made in the image of God. People have incredible potential. So it's working with people. It's helping people become their best selves in every circumstance. Helping students achieve their very best, and along with that, introducing them to the most transformative relationship that you can have in this universe, and that's a relationship with Jesus. And that's the thing. Education is transformative, but relationship with Jesus is even more so. So the two together for me is the magic pudding. It's amazing.
That's a beautiful summary of 44 years of pioneering Christian schooling, and I'm so glad that you're still doing it. I hope you're proud of what's you've achieved over the time, because I certainly hold you in great regard and respect.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you again for the time today.
Great.
And we might stop it there. But
it's a pleasure, and also with your aim to help people find purpose, I would advocate that people just seek God for purpose, because if you find the purpose for your life, then it is a beautiful ride. There are all sorts of difficulties along the way, sometimes profound difficulties, but finding that purpose is really finding life.
And I think that is only going to become more prevalent over the coming years.
Yes.
As society is changing, as technology is changing,
Yes.
I think more and more people are going to need to seek God for their purpose. So I'm with you. I certainly hope that everyone can do that. Thank you so much, Graeme.
Pleasure.
And it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Rule of Reason, and I will catch you on the very next episode.